If you cannot control yourself, you will be controlled by others. Let that line sink in for a moment. Every person listening right now has felt the truth of it in some way. Maybe you've had a moment where your emotions ran ahead of your judgment, and you said something you regretted. Maybe you've been swayed by someone else's agenda, not because you wanted to follow, but because you lacked the strength to steer yourself. This opening thought is not meant to frighten you, but to awaken you. Leadership does not begin when you're handed a title, a corner office, or the power to direct others. Leadership begins in the silent, invisible territory of your own heart and mind. Ask yourself honestly, are you truly in command of yourself each day? Or do you find yourself drifting, reacting, stumbling into habits you never chose but somehow repeat? If you were to stand before a mirror, not to examine your face but to examine your choices, what would you see? These are not easy questions, and yet they are the doorway to a deeper journey, the journey of self-leadership. Before we explore further, take a breath with me. Pause this very moment and notice. Where are you listening from? Is it morning, the start of your day when decisions have yet to be made? Or is it evening, when you reflect on choices already behind you? I invite you to leave a comment, letting me know where and when you're listening. Share your place in the world and the time of day, because though this is an audiobook, it is also a conversation between you and me. And if you want to stay close to these explorations of wisdom, subscribe to Audiobook Sanctuary and turn on notifications. That way, this journey into self-mastery becomes part of your rhythm, not just a passing moment. Now, let's return to that first truth. Self-leadership is the root of every form of leadership. Imagine a captain at sea. He may command the finest ship, the most skilled crew, and hold the most detailed maps. But if he cannot keep his own hands steady on the wheel, if fear or anger seizes him, the vessel will be lost, no matter how strong the crew. The same is true for us. We can hold positions of authority, managers, parents, business owners, but if we cannot keep steady within ourselves, those who follow us will inherit our instability. History has countless reminders of this principle. Consider Alexander the Great, whose conquests stretched across continents. He was not just brilliant on the battlefield, he possessed extraordinary self-discipline. From a young age, trained by Aristotle, Alexander learned to curb his impulses and cultivate strategic patience. His men followed him across impossible terrain, not merely because he was king, but because they saw him endure the same hardships, control his emotions, and demand of himself what he demanded of them. His self-leadership inspired loyalty far more deeply than his crown ever could. Now compare that to leaders undone by their lack of control. Consider emperors, executives, even local officials whose careers collapsed not because they lacked resources, but because they could not lead themselves. Think of the executive who indulges in arrogance and refuses to see flaws, or the politician whose temper erodes trust. Their downfall begins not in public, but in private, when self-leadership is abandoned. But self-leadership is not reserved for kings and generals. It matters just as much in your daily life. When you choose how to respond to an angry customer, when you decide whether to scroll aimlessly for hours or build a skill, when you bite back a careless word in your marriage and choose patience instead, that is leadership. You are leading yourself in small, invisible battles, and those victories prepare you for greater responsibilities. Let's talk about what self-leadership really involves. It's not just discipline, though discipline is crucial. It's not just responsibility, though responsibility defines your character. At its core, self-leadership is the art of managing your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, and your actions so that they align with your deeper values. You become your own guide, your own governor, rather than a victim of passing impulses or external pressures. Think of your mind as a city. Within its walls, there are neighborhoods of ambition, alleys of fear, wide roads of joy, and sometimes hidden corners of resentment. To lead yourself is to govern that city wisely. You do not silence every voice, but you decide which ones to give the microphone to. You allow ambition to energize, fear to caution, joy to motivate. But you do not let resentment drive the carriage. Without that governance, your city falls into chaos. And soon, outside forces, be they people, temptations, or circumstances, seize control. There's another layer here: habits. Many people imagine leadership as dramatic speeches and bold decisions. But real leadership, especially self-leadership, is often invisible. It's in the choice to wake early and write down your priorities. It's in resisting the easy lie and embracing the harder truth. It's in the evening when you reflect on the day, not with self-condemnation, but with a leader's eye. What worked, what failed, and what must be improved. These small acts create the architecture of leadership long before anyone else notices you. The paradox, of course, is that leading yourself often feels harder than leading others. Why? Because with others, you can demand, delegate, or direct. With yourself, you must persuade, discipline, and sometimes confront. Self-leadership means wrestling with your own procrastination, confronting your own excuses, and facing the shadow you'd rather ignore. And yet, if you cannot win these inner battles, you cannot possibly ask others to follow you into outer battles. One of the most powerful examples comes from the life of Nelson Mandela. Before he became the symbol of freedom for South Africa, Mandela endured 27 years in prison. Think of that span. 27 years where he could not command armies or lead rallies. And yet, in those years, he practiced the deepest form of leadership, mastering his own spirit. Instead of letting bitterness destroy him, he disciplined himself daily, exercising, studying, reflecting. He refused to let the prison guards dictate the boundaries of his soul. By the time he walked free, he had already become the leader his country needed, not because of his speeches, but because of his self-mastery. As you listen now, perhaps you're wondering, do I have to be as great as Mandela or Alexander to lead myself? The answer is no. Self-leadership is not measured by the size of your influence, but by the depth of your integrity. It is choosing each day to govern your inner city rather than letting it be overrun. And from that choice flows the power to lead in whatever sphere life calls you to: your family, your team, your community. The journey we are beginning in this audiobook will guide you through the 3 central pillars of self-leadership: discipline, self-awareness, and responsibility. We will also explore the tools that anchor these principles: journaling, reflection, and small habits that add up to great change. By the time we reach the end, you will see how self-leadership applies everywhere: work, business, relationships, and why the greatest leaders are those who first became masters of themselves. For now, let us anchor this first truth. If you do not lead yourself, others will lead you, often in directions you never intended. But if you take the wheel of your own mind, if you steady the ship of your own emotions, you can chart a course not only for yourself, but for all who sail with you. In the next part, we will step deeper into the practical beginning of this journey, mastering your thoughts and emotions. Because until you learn to manage the forces within, every force outside will have power over you. When we speak of self-leadership, the very first battlefield is within the mind and the heart. Thoughts and emotions are not visible to others, yet they silently dictate the course of your life. Before you can ever lead a team, inspire a company, or influence a community, you must first learn to master what goes on in the silent corridors of your inner world. Pause for a moment and ask yourself, do you control your thoughts, or do your thoughts control you? How often do you find yourself spiraling into worry about things that may never happen? How often does anger rise in you, uninvited, and shape your words in ways you later regret? This struggle is universal, and yet few take it seriously enough to practice mastery. Consider the life of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor often remembered as one of the last great Stoic philosophers. Though he ruled an empire, his daily writings in what we now call meditations were not about conquering distant lands, but about conquering himself. He wrote reminders to remain calm in the face of insults, to discipline his mind against vanity, to accept what he could not change. His empire may have stretched across continents, but the empire he valued most was his own mind. He understood that to lead well, he had to tame his thoughts and regulate his emotions first. This principle has never lost its relevance. Think of a modern leader who loses their composure on live television, snapping at critics or showing rage at a setback. In that single moment, years of credibility can erode. Followers may still respect the position, but they lose trust in the person. Why? Because if someone cannot manage their own emotions, how can they be trusted to manage the complexities of others? It is worth recognizing that thoughts are not harmless whispers. They are seeds. What you allow to grow in your mind today becomes the harvest you reap tomorrow. A person who continually feeds on fear will live in hesitation. One who entertains bitterness will eventually act in cruelty. And the one who nourishes gratitude and courage will build a life marked by strength and resilience. You cannot hide the garden of your mind for long. In time, its fruits reveal themselves in your words, your choices, and your leadership. But what about emotions? Emotions are powerful energies, neither good nor bad in themselves. Anger can destroy, but it can also protect when directed rightly. Fear can paralyze, but it can also sharpen awareness in moments of danger. Joy can lift others, but it can also blind if it turns into reckless optimism. The task is not to eliminate emotions, but to govern them. To be the leader of your emotions means to acknowledge them, to listen to what they are telling you, but not to let them seize the throne. A vivid illustration of this is found in the story of Abraham Lincoln. Throughout his presidency, Lincoln carried the weight of a divided nation, civil war, and endless criticism. He suffered from melancholy, what we might now call clinical depression. And yet, he learned to channel his emotions into deep empathy for others. His ability to listen, to reflect, and to forgive opponents stemmed from his own struggle with sadness. Rather than being mastered by his emotions, he allowed them to deepen his humanity. It is no coincidence that he is remembered not only as a president, but as a man of profound character. So how do we, ordinary people without empires or presidencies, begin to master thoughts and emotions? The process begins with awareness. You cannot lead what you do not notice. Start by observing the patterns of your thinking. Notice the moments when your emotions surge. Do you grow tense in traffic, defensive in meetings, resentful when others succeed? These are signals, invitations to examine what is truly happening beneath the surface. Next, practice the pause. Before you react, breathe. A single deep breath can interrupt the storm long enough for you to choose your response. Neuroscience confirms what ancient wisdom has always known. Pausing interrupts the chain reaction between emotion and action, giving your rational mind space to take the lead. This small habit is the difference between a leader who reacts impulsively and one who responds wisely. Then, replace the destructive with the constructive. If your mind obsesses over fear, deliberately feed it courage. Read biographies of those who overcame impossible odds. Recall your own victories. Repeat affirmations that anchor you. If anger flares, practice gratitude, writing down 3 things that still hold beauty in your life. If envy stirs, choose to celebrate someone else's win. These substitutions are not about denial. They are about redirection. Leaders do not pretend emotions don't exist. They transform them into fuel for growth. Another powerful practice is journaling. When you pour your unfiltered thoughts onto a page, you create distance between yourself and the noise of your mind. The act of writing slows down the chaos, makes it visible, and allows you to examine it like an observer. Over time, you begin to recognize recurring patterns, thoughts that trap you, emotions that hijack you, and you learn to address them with intention. Remember this: every leader you admire has faced the same inner storms you face. The difference lies in how they handled them. Winston Churchill wrestled with what he called his black dog of depression. Yet he rose each morning to rally a nation against despair. Martin Luther King Jr. faced fear and threats, yet he allowed courage, not terror, to guide his voice. What they mastered inside gave them authority outside. And here is the beautiful truth: as you grow in mastery of thoughts and emotions, people will notice. They may not see your journaling, they may never hear your inner dialogue, but they will feel your steadiness in the storm, your patience in the conflict, your clarity in the fog. And without you ever demanding it, they will begin to trust you, to follow your example. That is the unseen power of self-leadership. Let us seal this part with a reminder. Your mind is a city. Your emotions are its weather. Some days the skies are clear, others storm clouds gather. But you are the mayor, the one responsible for keeping order, setting direction, and ensuring that both sunshine and storm are used for the city's growth. If you neglect this duty, chaos spreads. If you accept it, harmony prevails. And as we move forward, we will step into the first of the great pillars that support self-leadership: discipline. Because while thoughts and emotions set the stage, discipline is the muscle that allows you to act consistently, even when feelings shift like the wind. Discipline is the invisible architecture that holds self-leadership together. Without discipline, your best intentions collapse. Your vision fades into wishful thinking, and your leadership becomes nothing more than empty words. Discipline is not about punishment, nor is it about stripping joy from life. Discipline is the decision to do what must be done, especially when you don't feel like doing it. Think of the countless mornings when your alarm clock rings. There are only 2 options: rise to the call or surrender to the comfort of staying where you are. Each time you rise, even against the tug of your emotions, you strengthen a muscle inside that will later carry you through far greater challenges. Each time you surrender, you train yourself to let impulse overrule intention. That is the essence of discipline: choosing intention over impulse, consistency over comfort. History abounds with men and women whose greatness rested not on brilliance alone, but on their commitment to disciplined living. Consider the life of George Washington. Before he became the first president of the United States, he was a young officer learning to temper his pride and practice restraint. Washington understood that an undisciplined leader is dangerous, both to himself and to those who follow him. His ability to endure brutal winters with his army, to maintain composure in the face of defeat, and to continually return to the path of duty, even when exhausted, made him the leader his nation needed. Washington's greatness was not only in his vision of liberty, but in his daily commitment to self-discipline. Or take the story of Serena Williams, the tennis champion who reshaped her sport. Her victories were not the product of talent alone. Thousands of unseen hours of training, strict diet, mental conditioning, and relentless repetition forged her excellence. Even on days when motivation was absent, discipline carried her forward. Motivation may inspire you to begin, but only discipline ensures you finish. Why is discipline so central to self-leadership? Because the path of leadership is long, and feelings are fleeting. One day you may feel inspired, but the next you may feel drained. If your leadership depends on feelings, it will collapse the moment fatigue sets in. Discipline ensures that your actions remain aligned with your values, regardless of the emotional weather. It is the anchor in storms, the compass in fog, the steady march when the road seems endless. Discipline often feels like sacrifice, but in reality, it is investment. The student who studies instead of binge-watching television is investing in future opportunities. The entrepreneur who saves instead of spending recklessly is investing in long-term growth. The parent who listens attentively instead of escaping into distraction is investing in the soul of a child. Each act of discipline is a seed planted, and time ensures the harvest will come. But discipline is not built overnight. It is forged in the furnace of repetition. Consider the ancient Spartans, renowned for their strength and courage. Their discipline began in childhood, with training that demanded resilience, control, and endurance. They did not wait for the battlefield to practice discipline. They built it daily so that when battle came, it was second nature. Likewise, if you wait until the crisis arrives to practice discipline, it will be too late. Discipline must already be your companion long before the test. How, then, can you begin to build discipline in your own life? Start small. The temptation is to overhaul everything at once. Wake at 5 a.m., exercise daily, read a book a week, change your diet. But this approach often collapses under its own weight. Instead, choose one simple commitment and honor it relentlessly. It could be as small as writing for 5 minutes each morning, or walking for 10 minutes each evening. The power is not in the size of the action, but in the consistency of keeping your word to yourself. Every time you keep that word, your identity shifts. You no longer see yourself as someone who tries and quits, but as someone who follows through. Another strategy is to anchor discipline in routine. When an action is tied to a specific time or trigger, it becomes automatic. For example, brushing your teeth is not a matter of willpower. You simply do it because it is routine. If you can attach a new habit, like reading a chapter, journaling, or exercising, to an existing routine, you reduce the need for constant decision-making. Discipline becomes less about wrestling with choice and more about flowing with established rhythm. It is also important to remember that discipline is not rigidity. To be disciplined does not mean to become inflexible, joyless, or harsh with yourself. It means you know what matters most, and you protect it with consistency. Even when you stumble, and you will stumble, discipline calls you back. A missed day is not failure. It is simply a reminder to return the next day with greater resolve. Let's draw wisdom from another example. Mahatma Gandhi. His discipline was not about physical power or strict control over others, but about unwavering commitment to nonviolence. Even when provoked, even when beaten, he held to the discipline of peace. His leadership inspired millions not because it was easy, but because it was disciplined. He embodied the principle that true strength is often shown in restraint rather than aggression. Discipline will test you. It will demand that you rise when comfort tempts you to remain idle. It will call you to finish tasks when distraction beckons. It will require that you silence excuses and choose responsibility. And in those moments, you will discover that discipline is not your enemy, but your ally. It is the bridge between who you are and who you aspire to be. Think again of a ship at sea. Without discipline, it drifts, at the mercy of currents and winds. With discipline, the sails are trimmed, the course is held, and even through storms, the vessel advances toward its destination. You are that ship. Discipline is the steady hand on the ropes. Let us end this section with clarity. Leadership without discipline is a hollow shell. People may follow your charisma for a time, but when hardship strikes, only disciplined leadership endures. Self-leadership requires that you demand consistency of yourself long before you ask it of anyone else. And as we move forward, we will step into the second great pillar of self-leadership: self-awareness. Because discipline alone can make you strong, but without knowing who you are, your strengths, your blind spots, your deepest motives, discipline can become aimless or even destructive. Self-awareness gives direction to discipline, ensuring that your strength is not only persistent, but purposeful. Self-awareness is the mirror every true leader must face. Discipline may carry you forward, but without self-awareness, you may be marching in the wrong direction. To lead yourself well, you must know yourself deeply, your strengths, your weaknesses, your blind spots, and the patterns that shape your decisions. Without this knowledge, leadership becomes guesswork. With it, leadership becomes authentic, grounded, and trustworthy. Pause for a moment and think. How well do you really know yourself? Most of us believe we understand who we are, but when life places us under pressure, hidden patterns surface. The colleague who thought of themselves as calm suddenly lashes out. The parent who believed they were patient loses their temper in a moment of stress. The entrepreneur who considered themselves confident hesitates when risk appears. These moments are not failures. They are revelations. They reveal what still lies unexamined within us. History offers us powerful lessons about the cost of ignoring self-awareness. Consider Napoleon Bonaparte, brilliant strategist, fearless on the battlefield, adored by his troops. Yet his lack of self-awareness, his blind spot for arrogance, led him to overreach, pushing into Russia with disastrous results. His brilliance was undeniable, but his inability to recognize his own limitations brought about his downfall. Without self-awareness, even the greatest gifts can destroy the one who holds them. Now, consider the opposite example. Socrates, the philosopher of ancient Greece. His wisdom was summed up in one phrase: know thyself. Socrates spent his life in dialogue, questioning not only others but himself. He understood that true strength is not in pretending to know all the answers, but in admitting what you do not know. His legacy endures because he modeled humility and self-inquiry, the heart of self-awareness. So what does it mean, practically, to be self-aware? It begins with recognizing your patterns. Notice the times of day when you are sharpest. Observe the triggers that ignite anger or fear. Pay attention to the situations where you thrive and those where you falter. Self-awareness is not about judgment. It is about observation. You are both actor and audience in your own life, watching yourself with honesty and curiosity. One powerful tool for cultivating self-awareness is feedback. Other people often see what we cannot. A trusted friend, a mentor, or even a spouse may point out blind spots that you resist acknowledging. It is not easy to hear, but it is essential. Consider Abraham Lincoln once more. He intentionally surrounded himself with a team of rivals, advisors who disagreed with him. Why? Because he knew his own perspective was limited. He wanted voices that revealed what he could not see. That humility to listen was a hallmark of his leadership. But feedback alone is not enough. You must also practice reflection. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what did I do well? Where did I fall short? What emotions drove my choices? This habit of daily reflection transforms experiences into lessons. Without reflection, experiences pass through us like water through a sieve. With reflection, they nourish growth. Self-awareness also demands honesty about both strengths and weaknesses. Some people are comfortable admitting weakness, but deny their strengths out of fear of arrogance. Others boast about strengths but refuse to acknowledge flaws. Both extremes are dangerous. To lead yourself, you must embrace both. Know your talents and use them boldly. Know your weaknesses and guard against them humbly. Leadership collapses when either is ignored. Consider the story of Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. Schultz grew up in poverty, watching his father struggle with jobs that offered no security or dignity. This awareness of his personal story shaped his leadership. He understood his strength, empathy, and built a company culture that emphasized employee care. At the same time, he recognized his limitations in certain operational areas and brought in leaders to balance his blind spots. His awareness of both shaped his decisions and sustained his company's growth. There is also the deeper dimension of values. Self-awareness means asking, what truly matters to me? Am I living by those values daily? Or am I compromising them under pressure? Many leaders fall when they forget this. They succeed outwardly, but neglect the inner compass of integrity. Knowing your values and holding to them is what gives weight to your leadership. Without this, success becomes hollow. Self-awareness can be uncomfortable because it demands confronting the shadow within. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, described the shadow as the parts of ourselves we prefer to hide. Anger, envy, pride, fear. But until we face the shadow, it controls us in secret. Self-awareness is the courage to bring the shadow into the light, to say, yes, these parts exist, and I must account for them. The leader who denies the shadow risks being ruled by it unconsciously. The leader who acknowledges it can guide themselves with integrity. Let us not forget, self-awareness is not self-obsession. The goal is not to endlessly analyze yourself, but to understand yourself enough to act wisely. Too much introspection can paralyze. The balance lies in knowing enough about yourself to lead firmly while remaining open to growth. Think again of the mirror. A mirror shows truth, but only if you dare to look. The most dangerous leader is not the one who lacks skill, but the one who refuses the mirror. Self-awareness asks you to stand before that mirror each day, to see yourself as you are, not as you wish to appear. And in doing so, you gain the ability to lead yourself with authenticity. As we close this section, remember, discipline is the muscle, but self-awareness is the map. Without it, you may march strongly but blindly. With it, your strength is guided, purposeful, and trustworthy. And now, let us move toward the third great pillar of self-leadership: responsibility. Because once you know yourself and commit to discipline, the true test is whether you will own your choices or fall into the easy trap of excuses and blame. Responsibility is the moment where self-leadership becomes visible to the world. You can practice discipline in private. You can grow in self-awareness through reflection. But responsibility is tested in the open. It is the courage to own your choices, your actions, and even your failures, without hiding behind excuses or shifting blame. Responsibility is the bedrock of trust. Without it, leadership crumbles, because no one can follow a leader who refuses to take ownership. Think of the difference between a child and an adult. A child spills milk and immediately looks for someone else to blame. The cat, the cup, the table. An adult accepts, I spilled it, I'll clean it up. The act may be small, but the principle is the same at every level of life. Leaders who constantly blame others reveal they have not yet matured into true leadership. Leaders who take responsibility, even when it is costly, earn respect that no title can manufacture. History gives us powerful lessons here. Consider President Harry Truman. On his desk in the Oval Office sat a sign that read, "The buck stops here." Truman understood that responsibility could not be passed down the chain. When he made the decision to drop the atomic bomb in World War II, it was a decision with unimaginable consequences. Agree or disagree with his choice, no one could accuse him of hiding behind others. He owned the weight of leadership, that is responsibility at its fullest measure. Contrast this with leaders who dodge accountability. Corporate scandals, political corruption, and public betrayals often share a common thread. Leaders who refused responsibility. When executives blame market forces for failures they caused, when politicians blame circumstances for mistakes born of their own choices, trust evaporates. People may forgive mistakes, but they rarely forgive excuses. Responsibility is not just about facing blame, it is also about claiming agency. To say, "I am responsible," is to say, "I have the power to act." Victimhood whispers that life happens to you. Responsibility declares that life happens through you. This shift transforms everything. Instead of waiting for change, you become the one who initiates it. Instead of complaining about what others have not done, you ask, "What can I do differently?" Take the story of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps. Surrounded by suffering he could not control, he realized that one freedom remained: the freedom to choose his response. Though his captors controlled his body, they could not control his spirit. He took responsibility for that inner freedom, and in doing so, he discovered meaning even in suffering. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, has since guided millions. Frankl's life is proof that responsibility is not limited by circumstances. It is a choice available to all. In daily life, responsibility shows up in smaller ways, but carries no less weight. The employee who admits a mistake before it becomes a crisis. The parent who apologizes to a child after speaking harshly. The friend who keeps a promise even when it's inconvenient. These moments may seem ordinary, but they build a reputation of reliability. And reputation is the currency of leadership. It is also worth noticing how responsibility transforms relationships. When you take ownership, you liberate others from the toxic cycle of blame. Teams become stronger when members say, "I'll handle my part," instead of pointing fingers. Families become healthier when individuals admit, "I was wrong," instead of escalating arguments. Responsibility diffuses conflict because it replaces defensiveness with humility. But responsibility is not only about mistakes, it also means owning your potential. Too many people hide behind excuses like, "That's just how I am," or "I can't change." True self-leadership refuses that passivity. It says, "Yes, this is who I have been, but I am responsible for who I become." Every new habit, every new choice, every step toward growth is an act of responsibility. Practical ways to cultivate responsibility include accountability systems. Keep a journal where you track promises made and promises kept. Share your goals with a trusted friend who will ask you about progress. Reflect each evening not only on what happened, but on how you responded. Did you blame or did you own? Did you hide or did you face? Responsibility grows in the soil of honesty. There is also the spiritual dimension of responsibility. Many traditions teach that each person will one day give an account of their life, not just to others, but to themselves, or even to God. Whether or not you share this belief, the principle is universal. Your choices matter, and you cannot escape their consequences. Responsibility means living today in a way that you will not regret tomorrow. One of the greatest modern examples of responsibility can be seen in Japanese culture after disasters. When earthquakes or tsunamis strike, communities often display remarkable unity. Instead of looting or rioting, people line up patiently for supplies, each taking responsibility for order and care. The world looks on in awe because responsibility in action is rare and therefore deeply inspiring. As you reflect now, ask yourself, where in my life am I tempted to shift blame? Where do I make excuses instead of changes? Where am I waiting for others to fix what I could begin repairing? These are the areas where responsibility will transform you. Responsibility does not make life easier. It makes life meaningful. It does not erase hardship. It gives hardship purpose. It does not remove failure. It redeems failure by turning it into a lesson. And when others see you consistently take responsibility, they will trust you not because you are flawless, but because you are honest. Let us close this section with clarity. Responsibility is the crown of self-leadership. Discipline gives strength. Self-awareness gives direction. But responsibility earns trust. Without it, leadership is a facade. With it, leadership becomes real, respected, and enduring. And now, we turn to the tools that make these principles practical. Because discipline, awareness, and responsibility remain abstract until anchored in daily practices. In the next section, we will explore the simple but powerful tools, journaling, reflection, and micro-habits that transform self-leadership from theory into action. Principles remain powerless until they are put into practice. Discipline, self-awareness, and responsibility may sound noble, but without practical tools, they quickly fade into abstract ideals. The difference between someone who merely admires leadership and someone who actually lives it lies in the daily habits that anchor their values. Self-leadership is built not in rare moments of inspiration, but in the quiet routines that structure each day. Let us begin with one of the simplest, yet most transformative tools: journaling. Writing down your thoughts may seem trivial, but it is in fact a powerful act of self-leadership. A journal is more than a record of events. It is a mirror of the soul. When you write, you slow the pace of your racing mind. Emotions that feel overwhelming shrink once captured in words. Patterns that were hidden reveal themselves when placed on paper. Leaders throughout history have used journals as companions on their journey. Think again of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor whose private notes became meditations. He did not write for others. He wrote to remind himself of his principles. Each page was a conversation with his own conscience, a tool for self-awareness and discipline. Centuries later, his words still inspire because they show the honest work of a man leading himself before leading others. In your own life, journaling need not be elaborate. Begin with 3 questions at the end of each day. What went well? What did not? What can I do differently tomorrow? In just 10 minutes, you transform your day into a lesson. Over weeks and months, you will see growth emerge, small but steady, as your awareness deepens and your responsibility sharpens. Another indispensable tool is reflection. While journaling captures thoughts, reflection shapes perspective. Reflection can be as simple as sitting quietly for 5 minutes at night, reviewing the choices of the day. It can also take the form of meditation or prayer, where you not only observe your actions, but listen for deeper guidance. The key is intentional pause. In a world addicted to speed, reflection is an act of rebellion, a way of reclaiming your mind from the chaos of constant noise. Consider the example of Benjamin Franklin. Each evening, Franklin asked himself a simple question: what good have I done today? This practice of reflection anchored his life. It forced him to confront wasted hours and to celebrate meaningful contributions. That single habit of reflection sharpened his discipline, deepened his awareness, and strengthened his responsibility. It is no wonder his legacy endures not only as a statesman and inventor, but as a man of profound character. The third tool is the power of micro-habits. Too often, people imagine leadership as a dramatic leap, a sweeping change. But true transformation comes from small, consistent actions. A micro-habit is a behavior so small you cannot fail it. Flossing one tooth, writing one sentence, doing one push-up. The genius of micro-habits is that they bypass the resistance of the mind. Once begun, they grow naturally, expanding into larger habits over time. For example, if you wish to cultivate discipline in reading, commit to reading 1 page a day. If you want to build the habit of exercise, start with 2 minutes of movement. These small actions seem insignificant, but they are seeds. Over time, seeds grow into forests. Self-leadership thrives not on rare bursts of effort, but on daily consistency. Micro-habits also train your identity. Each time you keep a small promise to yourself, you reinforce the belief that you are a person who follows through. That identity shift is far more powerful than willpower alone. Willpower fades, but identity endures. When you see yourself as a disciplined person, you naturally act with discipline. When you see yourself as responsible, you naturally take ownership. Micro-habits are the bridge from intention to identity. Technology can also serve as a tool if used wisely. Apps for habit tracking, reminders, and reflection can help anchor routines. But beware, tools are only as powerful as the intention behind them. A phone can be a library or a slot machine. A calendar can be a guide or a chain. The real tool is not the technology, but your choice in how to use it. One overlooked tool of self-leadership is rest. In a culture that glorifies constant hustle, rest may seem like weakness. Yet rest is where discipline is renewed, awareness is sharpened, and responsibility is clarified. Leaders who neglect rest soon find themselves reactive, exhausted, and short-sighted. Self-leadership means knowing when to stop, to recharge, and to return stronger. Consider athletes who train rigorously. They understand that rest days are not wasted. They are essential for growth. Another practice is accountability partnerships. Having someone who knows your goals and asks about your progress increases your likelihood of success dramatically. It may be a friend, a mentor, or even a small group. The presence of accountability turns vague intentions into clear commitments. Responsibility thrives in community. Let's not forget one of the most ancient tools of all: storytelling. Telling yourself the right story about who you are shapes your choices. If you believe you are a victim, you act like one. If you tell yourself you are a leader, you begin to live accordingly. Journals, reflections, and habits all serve this deeper purpose: to rewrite the story of your life so that it aligns with truth and potential, not excuses and fear. Think of Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before perfecting the light bulb. What kept him moving forward? The story he told himself. Each failure was not defeat, but discovery. That story shaped his discipline, his awareness, and his responsibility. His inventions did not arise from a single moment of genius, but from a lifetime of tools and practices that sustained his persistence. Self-leadership is never built in grand gestures. It is built in the daily act of writing a line in a journal, pausing to reflect, keeping a micro-habit, resting intentionally, and telling yourself the right story. These tools may seem simple, but their simplicity is their strength. They are available to all, yet only the wise use them consistently. As we conclude this section, hold this truth. Principles without practice are dreams without foundations. Journals, reflections, micro-habits, rest, accountability. These are the bricks and mortar of self-leadership. Use them faithfully, and the structure of your character will stand strong against the storms of life. Now, let us move to the final stage of this journey: application. Because leadership is not an abstract exercise. It is lived out in work, in business, in relationships. In the next section, we will see how self-leadership translates into influence everywhere you go, proving that the best leaders of others are always the best leaders of themselves first. Self-leadership is not a private philosophy meant only for journals and quiet evenings of reflection. Its true worth is revealed in application, in the way you show up at work, in your business, and in your relationships. The principles of discipline, self-awareness, and responsibility are not meant to stay hidden within you. They are meant to overflow, shaping how others experience you. Every sphere of life becomes a proving ground for the kind of leader you are becoming. Let us begin with work. Whether you lead a team or serve within one, the way you govern yourself determines the level of trust others place in you. Consider the employee who always arrives late, misses deadlines, and makes excuses. Even if they are brilliant, their lack of self-leadership erodes credibility. Now think of the colleague who consistently meets commitments, listens attentively, and takes ownership of mistakes. That person may not hold a title, yet others instinctively look to them for guidance. Leadership emerges not from authority, but from credibility, and credibility is built on self-leadership. In business, the stakes rise even higher. Companies rise and fall not only on strategies and products, but on the character of their leaders. A business leader without discipline may chase every trend, burning resources without direction. A leader without self-awareness may overestimate their strengths, ignoring blind spots until crisis erupts. A leader without responsibility may blame competitors, markets, or employees, while the real cause lies within. History is filled with examples of businesses destroyed not by competitors, but by the inner failures of their own leadership. And yet, businesses that thrive often reflect the self-leadership of their founders. Consider Warren Buffett, often called the Oracle of Omaha. His success is not built on chasing every opportunity, but on disciplined patience, choosing investments he understands and resisting the temptation of short-term gains. His self-awareness allows him to admit mistakes openly, and his responsibility ensures he faces consequences honestly. Investors trust him not only for his intelligence, but for the self-leadership that guides his decisions. Relationships, too, reveal the fruit of self-leadership. A marriage cannot survive on charm alone. It requires discipline to choose kindness daily, self-awareness to recognize patterns that harm intimacy, and responsibility to admit when you are wrong. Friendships deepen when each person takes ownership of their words and actions instead of waiting for the other to fix the bond. Parenting becomes stronger when parents lead themselves first, showing children by example how to manage emotions, own mistakes, and stay consistent. Children may not follow what you say, but they will almost always follow what you model. Leadership in relationships is not about control. It is about influence born of integrity. When those closest to you see you lead yourself, keeping promises, managing anger, practicing gratitude, they feel secure in your presence. They trust your guidance because they trust your example. And when conflict arises, as it always will, the leader who owns responsibility instead of casting blame sets the tone for reconciliation. Self-leadership also influences communities. Imagine a neighborhood where individuals take responsibility for their streets, their schools, and their shared spaces. Contrast it with one where everyone waits for someone else to act. The difference between decline and renewal often lies not in government policies, but in the daily self-leadership of citizens who refuse to hide behind excuses. Communities grow strong when individuals lead themselves. One of the clearest demonstrations of applied self-leadership comes from the life of Nelson Mandela after his release from prison. He did not seek revenge, though he had every reason to. Instead, he chose discipline over anger, self-awareness over ego, and responsibility over bitterness. His leadership healed a divided nation because it was anchored in personal mastery. People followed him not out of fear, but out of trust. His example proves that self-leadership is not abstract. It is the seedbed of influence that changes nations. Application also means embracing the reality that people watch you more closely than you realize. Your colleagues notice how you handle stress. Your children notice how you respond when plans fail. Your friends notice whether your words align with your actions. Every small act of self-leadership sends ripples outward, teaching others what is possible. You may think no one is watching, but leadership always leaves an imprint. So how can you intentionally apply self-leadership every day? Begin by asking 3 questions each morning. 1. Where do I need discipline today? 2. Where must I be self-aware today? 3. Where will I need to take responsibility today? These questions align your inner principles with outer actions. Then, at day's end, reflect. Did I live those commitments? Such alignment between reflection and action ensures that self-leadership is not a hidden ideal, but a lived reality. As you integrate these practices into your work, your business, and your relationships, you will notice something remarkable. Influence begins to flow naturally. You won't need to demand authority because people will recognize it in you. You won't need to declare yourself a leader because your example will speak louder than any declaration. True leadership never has to announce itself. It is recognized by the fruit of self-leadership lived out in daily life. And now, as we close this audiobook, let us gather all the threads together. For in the end, the path of leadership always circles back to the same truth. The best leader you can ever become is the one who first learned to lead themselves. We have traveled through the journey of self-leadership, and each step reveals the same truth in a different form. Leadership is not first about directing others. It is about governing yourself. If you cannot command your own impulses, you will be commanded by them. If you cannot manage your own emotions, they will manage you. If you cannot take responsibility for your choices, you will forever be trapped in blame. Self-leadership rests on 3 pillars. Discipline gives you strength. It is the daily choice to act with consistency even when feelings waver. Self-awareness gives you direction. It shines a light on your strengths and your blind spots so that your discipline does not run aimlessly. Responsibility gives you trust. It earns the respect of others by showing that you will own both your victories and your failures. But principles need tools to take root. Journals capture your thoughts, reflection deepens your wisdom, and micro-habits anchor your growth. Rest restores your energy, and accountability sharpens your responsibility. These small practices build the muscles of self-leadership, turning ideals into actions. And the application of these practices extends everywhere. In your workplace, self-leadership makes you reliable and credible. In business, it keeps you steady when markets shake. In relationships, it makes you trustworthy, turning words into lived example. In communities, it inspires others to step up, creating ripple effects of integrity and growth. At the heart of it all lies a single truth. The greatest leaders are not those who command the loudest or accumulate the most followers. They are those who govern themselves with integrity, patience, and courage. Their leadership is not born of position, but of character. And that kind of leadership cannot be taken away because it is not dependent on titles or applause. It is rooted in who they are. As you finish listening to this audiobook, remember, the world does not first need you to lead others. It needs you to lead yourself. When you choose discipline over impulse, awareness over ignorance, and responsibility over excuses, you change the atmosphere around you. People will see it, they will feel it, and they will follow not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. So let this be your charge. Rise each day as your own leader. Govern your thoughts. Steer your emotions. Shape your habits. Own your choices. Lead yourself faithfully, and you will not only transform your own life, you will also become the kind of leader the world desperately needs. Because in the end, the best leader you will ever meet is the one you become when you first lead yourself.